Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another CARS reading workshop as part of our Jack Westin MCAT podcast. I'm your host, Molly, and today we are joined by one of my great friends in the MCAT space, Usher, who is a fourth year med student and a CARS expert. Usher, I am so excited to have you on this podcast today.
Thank you, Molly. I'm really excited to be here. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to being on the podcast and working with you all. Yeah.
It's going to be super fun. And if anyone listening has never listened to a CARS reading skills workshop with us, essentially we're going to go through a CARS passage start to finish. We're going to go sentence by sentence and really talk about what the key points are that we would want to be tracking as a student reading this under timed conditions. So we'll read through, we'll pause, and we'll say, hey, what are we learning about the author as we are navigating this CARS passage? Now, this is a real CARS passage from our website. It's called Eco-Archaeology, and it's the daily passage from January 14th. Okay, if you're listening to this on January 14th and you want to take a look at this passage ahead of time, you're welcome to navigate to our website, jackweston.com, and you'll be able to see it right there, right on our homepage. If you're listening to this and it is not January 14th, no worries. We have the link to the passage in the description. You can give this a try first if you'd like. It's always something we recommend so that you can follow along as we're reading and kind of give yourself an opportunity to test what you understood before you hear what Usher and I understood from this passage. Um, I'm excited for this one too because I am a huge science, evolution and ecology nerd. And this is called eco-archaeology. Um, Usher, did you nerd out about this? I feel like that's my weird weird little science quirk of interest.
It was definitely like a throwback to bio in college. We learned, like you said, you had experience with it and had a passion for it. It was for me, ecology was something I explored in college for the most part. We didn't see much of it in medical school, which is kind of a shame,
Yeah.
but it seems like, it's going to be a really exciting passage. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In a way, I feel like psychology in certain areas is like human ecology. It's like the
yeah,
human ecosystem and how we navigate communities and cultures and things like that. Not so
right.
much, how we interact with other species, but hey, ecology is not a huge part of the MCAT, although sometimes you get a little nugget of interest in cars, which is kind of fun. Although, like we talk about a lot in courses and things like that, sometimes the topics you're more comfortable with and interested in are actually kind of dangerous to read in cars, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to bring any of your own knowledge or your pre-existing biases to a cars passage. So, Usher, you might have to rein me in sometimes if I get too excited.
Will do, Molly.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's hop in with this passage itself. Again, it's a pretty fun one. So we'll start here with sentence one of paragraph one. It says, the Forest Service Eastern Region is using archaeology as part of a larger plan that recognizes the complexity and interconnections of all of the resources in the national forests. Okay, so sentence one, we're getting our subject, right? We're talking about the Forest Service in a particular region. We're talking about archaeology and how archaeology can help us understand like connectedness, basically. So, archaeology is being used to better understand probably an ecosystem or resources. Um, it's the first sentence. It's important to pause and reflect on because it gives us a lot of context for what we're going to read. Um, but I want to see how this idea develops. Okay, so something about
Right.
the Forest Service, archaeology, and interconnectivity within a forest. What do you think? Are you seeing anything special here?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. We're kind of seeing here that the Forest Service is sort of using archaeology as part of a plan, and it kind of treats forests as like interconnected systems. Really, I felt that this was kind of like a more of a fact than an argument. I kind of felt like it was stating exactly what it is. I'm not really seeing much of like what the author thinks yet, but that's sort of what I'm looking for. And I can kind of see like maybe, what we're going to see next is the author delving more into, I guess, the forest system. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm sort of looking forward to.
Yeah. And I'm interested, like Forest Service being or studying interconnectedness within forests. That to me makes sense. To me, I'm like archaeology, huh? Like
Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
that they delve into that more. That could just be a throwaway sentence, but I'm hoping that that's something that we get into because that's the part of that sentence that feels kind of unexpected or like a topic that might be worth a car's passage. So let's
right,
see.
right.
Again, first sentence is really helping us understand what we might be getting into. So let's see what second sentence offers. It says archaeologists show how forests are complex environments with a complicated history. Okay, so we had said archaeology helps, Forest Service understand interconnectivity, resources, etc. But it's not just, hey, this is how we could use it. This feels like the actual finding. Like this is objectively what archaeologists can do and show, right? Or to the author. So
Right.
the archaeologists are showing forests as essentially complex environments, complicated history. This is like the finding of archaeology with relation to the Forest Service. That seems like a pretty important sentence in my mind that we want to track moving through this paragraph.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's see how we wrap up P1. Last sentence here. With this initiative, archaeologists not only reconstruct and interpret how people shaped past ecosystems, but also look at how this information can help restore and sustain them in the future. Interesting. So, again, it seems like we're really just establishing how important archaeology is for this understanding of forests, right? It's past, possibly present, I don't know, and future, past and future at least. Um, so it's to me, what I'm thinking is sentence two, where we're talking about what archaeologists will actually show. It's almost like sentence three is demonstrating how important that is. And like this is not even just in the past, it could be the future too, right? Archaeology showing forests as complex, right? Complex environments with a complex history. That's possibly a pretty important, thing that we'd want to track. That's what I'm getting from P1.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Molly. I feel like, that second sentence is super important. This idea that archaeologists showing forests have a complex past, they're just complex in general. I kind of felt like the complex and complicated, like those two words kind of were linked together in a way.
Totally.
Just showing there's a lot going on there. So yeah, I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah. And I feel like at this point, as a reader, I'm trying to think like, okay, well, archaeology, that's like artifacts. That's like dinosaur bones. Like how does this relate to forests?
Yeah.
You you want to find interest in cars passages, but curb the, distracting, derailing thoughts of like trying to imagine and project how these might connect. Wait for the author to tell you. Okay, you want to be using this as a stimulus for your curiosity, but be careful, and this might just be me following your imagination to find connections that the author hasn't said yet. So for now, archaeology shows forests as complex environments and having, complex history. That's what we're getting. Let's take a look at P2. So P2 begins, it says, although this applied approach is not new to the discipline, it is quite an innovation at the Forest Service. Okay, so using archaeologists is innovative with the Forest Service. Maybe this is a newer system. Okay. Um, that's good to know, right? I'm interested to see if the author feels this is a good thing, a bad thing, surprising, right? It's like this is something that we may explore, but I want to know how the author feels about this innovation, right? Do you support the
Right.
use of archaeology here? Do you think it's a bad thing? What are your thoughts? It's not just about what the context is. It's really trying to digest and figure out, well, how does the author feel about this situation that we want to ultimately identify and track?
Right.
So it's innovative. All right. Next sentence says traditionally, the archaeologist's job was to ensure that projects that could potentially destroy sites, such as road building, followed the myriad federal preservation laws and regulations passed to protect them. Okay, so this is also helping us understand, right? It's innovative for them to be part of this Forest Service team, and now we're getting how they used to interact with Forest Service. So I guess previously, archaeologists were more like regulation enforcers. That was their job. Okay, that's an important nugget for us to track. That's what archaeologists used to do. Now they're probably not doing that, but
Yeah.
that was the past purpose of having archaeologists present on these projects. So in my head, they are like rule enforcers, or they're enforcing regulations. That was their job. Let's see what happens now. All right. The new approach, however, integrates archaeology and other heritage programs directly into land and resource management. Okay, so now they're more integrated, but sure, we just read past a very important word, and we talk about it so much in our courses. There's this word, however, right? What is the
Yep.
significance of that? Why is that important?
A lot of times, what the AMC and the MCAT, especially with cars, loves to test is, we might see some idea that the author is telling us, and then right after, we'll have like a contrast word that, possibly goes partially or completely against what we just saw. And that's something that they love to test. They love to, see that you're able to pick up that idea and realize, hey, these two sentences kind of contrasted. To me, it's like as if they're trying to make sure I'm actually reading, right? It's like, I saw this idea, this super long sentence that we just saw that started with traditionally, and it's really long, right? And if you take the time to read it, you might pause and think about it. And then I feel like sometimes, especially after you digest a long sentence or a long idea like that, it's pretty easy. It's like human nature to, maybe go a little faster on the next one. But then you have that contrast word, right? Which and the idea of the sentence, which is saying, well, archaeology is kind of built directly into forest planning. That's kind of what they're saying in this one. Whereas the previous one was like, hey, actually, before we just followed the preservation laws. So I think they're really trying to make sure, that you're picking up these ideas. They're trying to make sure that you know how these sentences are connecting, and it's something that they love to test and get you on. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and in this case, the contrast is between what the role was in the past versus what it is now. Right? It's not necessarily like the argument has shifted. It's not like, I said, I don't mean to be rude, but that shirt is the wrong color for you. It's like it's not like I've got a but that's separating two truly contradictory ideas. Obviously, if I'm going to insult your shirt, I don't really care that I said, I don't mean to be rude. That in
yeah.
my head is like a true, like very hallmark contrast word situation. Like the
Mhm.
first and second part are in conflict. The second part typically matters more. Here, it's more of a progression, but anytime, for anyone listening, anytime you see a however, a but, something like that, just, allow your ears to perk up a little bit. You want to see how is this being used? Because like Usher said so eloquently, the MCAT loves to test this stuff, right? And sometimes it really is critical to your understanding of the passage. So in this paragraph so far, we saw the archaeologist's job in the past is basically to regulate or to enforce regulations. Now they're an actual team member. Okay, and this is new. Okay, no longer are they seen as encumbrances to projects put there to ensure compliance with the law, but as an integral part of them. Perfect. So, pretty in line with what we had said before, right? They're not just regulation enforcers, they're now part of the team. No surprise there. Last sentence, archaeologists are now essential to the Forest Service's job, demonstrating the history of forests as man made products. Oh, okay. Archaeologists being essential to Forest Service, we've established that pretty well. Okay, I would say that's definitely something that we want to be comfortable with. The
For sure.
second part of that is, to me, pretty weird, right? Demonstrating the
Yeah.
history of forests as man-made products. I feel like when I read that, I'm like, huh?
Yeah, like what do you mean a forest is a man-made product, you know?
Yeah, what are you talking about? And I feel like at this moment, it doesn't really make a ton of sense. It stimulates my curiosity. I want to keep this in mind. This could just be a completely throwaway sentence or idea. I want to see if this develops, but that definitely strikes me as something that we have not really talked about or addressed thus far. Very interesting. So in P2, we had a lot going on. Usher, what do you think? What are the nuggets of wisdom we need to be tracking if we were mapping or just, repeating to ourselves what we care about here?
Yeah, I think the first thing is probably the that like contrast that we saw between the roles, right? In the past, we had archaeologists kind of making sure that they respected the laws, respected the regulations that were going on. And then we had that contrast, well, that said, hey, they're actually very essential, to the Forest Service. They're directly integrated into the Forest Service. And then finally, this idea that we saw in the end, I think because of the fact that I haven't seen it yet, because of the fact that it's kind of brand new and took me by surprise a little bit, it might be something I want to keep in mind as well.
Yeah,
So, but I would definitely say the two most important are those the contrast between those two sentences we saw regarding them respecting the laws before and now being directly integrated or essential to that Forest Service.
agreed. Yeah, I feel like this last portion of the last sentence, the demonstrating the history of the forests as man-made products, to me, that's like a dot 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 of something that hopefully they'll clarify, right? So
Right.
let's take a look at P3. Maybe we get more about this man-made product idea. Maybe we don't. Okay, maybe this is a completely isolated, standalone, throwaway sentence. But I like to assume that authors are very intentional about the way they frame things. So let's go ahead and hold on to that, and let's go investigate within P3 and see if this continues. So, sentence one of P3 says a major objective of this initiative is to promote a closer working relationship between natural resource specialists and archaeologists, historians, ethnographers, and related professionals. People who sometimes hold the key to reproducing, restoring, and sustaining the ecological conditions of the past. Okay, excellent. So bring people together. We were kind of talking about in P2 that we wanted archaeologists to be part of the team, right? And it kind of sounds like that's the effort is we want everyone to be working as a team. Um, I think this is still pretty consistent with what we had said before. I don't see anything really about the man-made products, but I feel this is pretty in line with the ideas that we had with P2. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm going to keep reading and see if we get anything more. Um, we see many land managers, ecologists, and biological scientists discount the fact that people have shaped ecosystems for millennia. Ooh, I feel like I'm getting a hint of the man-made part now.
Yeah.
We're shaping ecosystems, right? We were talking about the forest as man-made products. We are currently discounting the fact that people have shaped ecosystems. So, with a sentence like this, based on the context, do we think the author believes that people have shaped ecosystems, or do we believe in what other people, the land managers, ecologists, and biological scientists discount? Do we believe it or do we not based on this sentence? What do you think?
I would say that this sentence is kind of saying that, many scientists sort of ignore that humans have shaped ecosystems for thousands of years. So I feel like it's kind of saying, well, these other people have kind of been discounting that fact, whereas the author might believe that humans shape ecosystems and have impacted ecosystems, which I think, like, as an idea makes sense. It's not necessarily saying that they're creators of the forest or they're creators of the ecosystems, but it's more so like, well, humans impact them, humans affect them in some way, shape, or form. So I think that that's kind of what the author maybe where the author is headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a great point, right? Like the the fact they said they discount the fact, right? Like to me, that's cut and dry. The author believes that people have shaped ecosystems for millennia, but that's also a great point. Like from P2, we were talking about man-made products, and I was like, what do you mean? Like we're going in and planting all these like little saplings and watching forests grow, like literally
Right.
completely architected by humans. But you're right. This seems like it's relating back to man-made, and it doesn't necessarily mean we start the forest from scratch. The author's saying here that we're shaping ecosystems. So we're kind of clarifying what the man-made idea was. It's not literally created from our
Yeah.
hands, but that we have some level of control or impact on our ecosystems. Yeah, I like that you point that out. So I think that's something the author now believes in. It feels reminiscent to what we said in P2. But we've got a little bit more here in P3. Let's finish it up and see what we learn in these last two very short sentences. So they imagine they are working with pristine environments untouched by the human hand. So again, a lot of scientists, land managers, etc., don't think that humans change their environment. This is still consistent with that first half of our last sentence. And then the last sentence of P3 says archaeologists correct this viewpoint. Okay, so that's very straightforward, very direct, right? That last sentence in P2 is essentially the same as this here. If you missed it in P2 or if you were uncomfortable with it and you wanted to hold off and say, I don't know what's going on with this man-made products, you'd call this new here, okay? But what we're definitely communicating here in P3 is architects are essentially showing that humans do shape our ecosystems and our environment, right? Or probably our forests, given the context. But that is something that is clear based on P3, which is pretty cool, right? We followed it, we tracked it. Here it is again.
Right. Yeah. And I think you know, I think it can be a little confusing where the author's like referring to a they, right? Like they imagine, they discount, all these other people discount the fact. So that can, I think that if I was, reading this and not, taking a second to digest it, it might be tough. But essentially, the whole idea here is that they're the other people act like forests were originally untouched, and then the archaeologists are kind of fixing that mistaken assumption.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Actually, yeah, good point. Archaeologists correct this viewpoint. Again, it's the tone here is very certain. The author
mhm.
believes humans shape their ecosystems. We called it a fact. We talked about how people discount it, and archaeologists correct this viewpoint. Okay, we know that the author feels that humans do shape their ecosystems, which again is technically it's building off P2. Okay, so if you recognized it there, then this is the same thing as that last sentence. If not, you'd want to track this here to P3 because they're really the same root argument in P3 as the end of P2. Okay, well, let's take a look at P4, right? Yes, P4, um,
P4.
and see how things develop. So, studies of early logging, of its methods, techniques, and associated archaeology or archaeological features have been useful in determining the industry's impact on terrestrial as well as aquatic environments. Okay, so we're talking about logging and environments. This is just a new situation. I'm interested to see, are you going to use this as an example of how archaeologists help us recognize the impact humans have on ecosystems? I don't know. We're just suddenly talking about logging all the sudden. Um, Probably they're going to set up an example or something, some specific, instance of this argument from previous. Who knows? I'm gonna keep reading, right? Something about logging. We're studying logging. At northwestern Pennsylvania's Allegheny National Forest, archaeologists are studying the effect of the turn of the century railroad era on today's forest cover. Okay, so we have a specific forest that archaeologists are studying, and we're studying the impact of railroad on forests. That to me sounds like humans shaping ecosystems, or at least humans having some impact on forests, right? Are you feeling that? It's like kind of
Yeah,
similar, right?
absolutely. And this is another thing that, the MCAT loves to do, right? Like we identified an idea, which was, this idea of the man-made objects and what that really means, like humans kind of impacting the ecosystem. And then they're giving us sort of an example of that idea, like, in a without saying it, right? It's kind of like show, don't tell. When you
Totally.
all, write your medical school essays, you're always going to remember show, don't tell, show, don't tell. This is like an example of that, right? Saying this railroad on today's forest cover. So I think Molly, I completely agree with you. That's exactly what we're doing, kind of relating back to that idea.
Yeah. And of course, in all of our previous cars reading skills workshops and in our free classes that we hold in our textbooks, one of the things that we encourage students constantly is like reflect on ideas that are showing up again and again, right? Like at this point, we've had really kind of three, maybe four ideas, right? We talked about how archaeologists are showing forests and their complexity in P1. We talked in P2 about kind of the difference in the role, how they used to be regulation enforcers. Now they're part of the team. And we introduced this man-made object idea, right? Or this idea that humans shape their ecosystems. Of those ideas, based on what we've seen so far, which one do we think is the most important to the author based on objective evidence? What do you think?
I would probably say this one about the man-made objects, forest kind of being both natural and man-made objects. I guess it's never denied that forests are natural. So, kind of this idea that forests are both natural and man-made objects. We're seeing an example on it right here. We saw it in paragraph 2, we saw it in paragraph 3, and now again in paragraph 4. So that's kind of being repeated over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. And repetition is really important, right? It's again like, what is the author choosing to use most of their text to describe, right? Which
Yeah.
ideas did the author come back to again and again? And so far, this has been a pretty extensive argument. It doesn't feel like like the most general argument, right? It's a lot of students want to pick the thing that's the most just general, all-encompassing that was mentioned, but it's not, it's less about that. It's what is talked about the most. What is the author using most of their space to discuss? And I think at this point, that's what we're going to say. We still have more paragraphs, but I think it's a good point to pause and reflect because so far in P4, right, we're still talking about this idea originally from P2. Now we've got a specific example. Yeah, it seems like that's pretty supported. So again, reorienting to the passage, we're in P4. We're talking about the Allegheny National Forest and how ultimately we're studying logging and railroads on forests, right? How that impacts forests. So
Right.
we have one last sentence here in P4 and then we'll move on. It says archaeologists are also examining vegetational change and ecosystem response over the last century, which, together with historic documents, suggests that the modern forest's roots are intertwined with the era's timber harvesting practices, rail logging lines, and wood chemical factories. So they didn't specifically say this is still in that national forest, but the idea here that's being described is the same, right? It's talking about how humans have impacted forests, right? And how forests are shaped by human influence. Okay, so for me, I'm thinking P4, this is exactly what we saw at the end of P2 and in P3. We're just specifically now talking about the Allegheny National Forest. That was a specific example that was given. I would track that. Oftentimes people bring up like, oh, I didn't realize that detail was important. I would say this particular name is worth tracking because it was a very specific instance that showed the author's argument, right? It's support for that argument. So I would probably just track that as far as anything new and useful from this paragraph.
Completely agree with you, Molly. And to your point, regarding, I remember you mentioned earlier how with paragraph two, if you didn't like completely get that idea in paragraph two, you could see it there in paragraph three. And
Yeah.
what we talked about in paragraph four here, this last sentence also demonstrated the same idea, right? Which was, these rail logging lines. It's giving you multiple examples of the humans, sort of impacting the forest. So I think it's pretty clear at this point what our big idea that's being repeated is. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And we still have a couple more paragraphs. Who knows? Maybe we could change, but I feel like
Hmm.
the author's pretty much doubled down on this. Triple down,
Yeah.
actually, technically.
Yeah.
P2, P3, P4. Um, but we're going to keep an open mind. This is a passage that has a lot of paragraphs. We actually have four more short paragraphs left. Let's see what we're going to get into. So we're going to start P5 now. It says zoo archaeology has played a role in restoring and protecting threatened, endangered, and sensitive species. Okay, so this is a specific type of archaeology that's involved in restoration and protective or in protection of species. Um, this isn't just, studying the impact that we've had on ecosystems. It's more about species. Again, this could be a total throwaway sentence. This could also be a new layer to the argument. Still talking about archaeology and some sort of ecological function, but I'm not sure if they're switching gears here. So I'm going to look at the next sentence and see, are we now talking about specific types of archaeology? Or are we going to tie this back to the argument that, archaeologists show human impact? Let's see, right? The archaeological record yields information on the evolution of species, including their past abundance, relationship with sources of food, competition with other animals, and the effects of changes in climate and water temperature. Okay, I feel like this sentence just feels like a fact to me, right? Like this is just things that are present within the archaeological record. Um, it's not jumping out as an argument. It's not clearly supporting the previous argument, really, but it's also not introducing anything new. I think at this point, a student might be a little concerned. Like, did I miss something? Um,
Yeah.
but we have one last sentence. Let's read it and then decide what we want to do with it. Okay, one last sentence here in P5. It says, in quotes, eco-archaeological, end quote, it's just that term, analysis of plant remains are also useful to wildlife biologists, tracking changes in habitats and species diversity. Okay, I was really hoping for a sentence that clearly tied back to the idea that humans impact or shape their environment in forests, and I didn't get that. Okay. So
Right.
I'm now thinking, all right, especially this last sentence, I feel like we're talking back about specific types of archaeology and how they're useful. We're talking about more species level, not a forest, not an ecosystem, but a habitat and species, how archaeology can be useful to that. I don't know about you, Usher. I'm thinking I got to track this as a separate idea. I can't say that this is an extension of P2, P3, P4.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think you can absolutely confirm that by, I really liked how you were going through these sentences with each sentence. You were like, well, that's possibly new, that's possibly new. And then we confirmed it when we got to the end that it really didn't relate back. So I think I completely agree with you on this one. It's this idea of habitat and species diversity and how we're tracking changes. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's still archaeology. We're still basically talking about how archaeologists are part of this team and how they could
Hmm.
be useful, but it's not about demonstrating human impact, right? Maybe it
Right.
is. Maybe that's where we're going. Maybe we'll connect P5 back to that idea in P6. Who knows? But P5 really is kind of a standalone thing so far. So don't get nervous about that. Okay? It's totally fine. I still feel pretty confident in what our main point has been thus far, P2, P3, P4, this idea that, archaeologists help us demonstrate or it shows humans' impact on environment, but I would track P5 as separate. So let's take a
Yeah.
look at P6. Hydrologists and fisheries biologists are using archaeological evidence in restoring streams and reintroducing species. Okay, so again, it's like how archaeology can be useful for species. This feels, we're basically saying that it is useful not just to study species, but to restore and reintroduce. Okay, it's another function of archaeology. It's kind of related to what we said before, but we'll see if they continue to clarify it, right? It's how archaeology can be used. Okay.
Right.
Um, and this whole paragraph is actually just two sentences. So the recovery of fish remains from archaeological contexts is proving invaluable in analyzing past fish distributions, species displacement, catastrophic events, and in conjunction with knowledge of current natural events, are helping explain long and short-term trends. Okay, so this paragraph, I feel like it's related to what we said before in the last paragraph, right? But rather than just tracking changes, like we had said before, this is like how that is useful, like how that information can actually be used to take action. So we
Right.
could actually use archaeology to restore streams and species and fish. It's how it can be used to take action on things. So related but slightly different here in P6. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think paragraph five was kind of like a little vague. It was just like, hey, we're gonna track changes. But then paragraph six, it's like actually, like, yeah, I mean, they're looking at changes in a way, right? They're analyzing the catastrophic events and the distributions, and I guess you could say in a way that that's looking at changes. But that new idea that you mentioned is the fact that they're actually restoring them. So I think that in my opinion, it's also like a separate idea. It's not something we've mentioned. I think tracking changes is general, whereas this is more specific. So you could definitely treat it like a separate idea.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. They're related but not equal for sure.
Hmm.
All right, let's wrap up with P7 and 8. So at Horseshoe Bay in northern Minnesota's Chippewa National Forest, archaeologists have analyzed approximately 200,000 fish bones, otoliths, and scales recovered from trading post structures dating from 1820 to 1860. I feel like this feels reminiscent of that discussion of the Pennsylvania National Forest. Like all of a sudden, we're very specific, which is
Yeah.
maybe a hint that we might be providing an example about Horseshoe Bay, right? Or this Chippewa National Forest.
Yeah.
Very specific. We're talking about fish bones. Archaeologists are discovering this and analyzing it. We'll probably tie this back to P5 or 6, is my thought, but keep reading, right? It's very detail oriented. Is this an example? Let's hold off and find out. Okay, this data, coupled with information from traders' journals and historic government documents, provides a vivid picture of the abundance and diversity of species before the arrival of the fish harvesting industry. Okay, so we have information before the arrival of fish harvesting industry. That sounds like humans, right? We have information of what humans or what this looked like before humans came in and possibly had an impact. Kind of feels like what we're talking about or what we've been, discussing throughout the passage. Last sentence here in P7, fisheries biologists and archaeologists are comparing this information with survey data from the modern era, 1950 to 1990, to draft a plan for managing the region's current aquatic resources. Okay, I feel like this is a really fun paragraph because I think maybe it's perhaps most related to the paragraph just before it, right? Of how we can basically take action on the information that we collect through archaeology, right? Probably, pretty in line with P6, just definitely track Horseshoe Bay. But also to me, this kind of connects back to our big idea from earlier of how archaeology can show how humans shape forests and ecosystems. Like that's what we're basically saying is like we look at data. Archaeology gives us data from before. Archaeologists can also help us evaluate things now, compare them, and that shows how we've had an impact. Like I would
Yeah.
objectively call this related to the paragraph just before it, but I see elements of that key idea that we introduced earlier. And I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually, it's funny, Mike, because when I remember when you first read that, when you read that first sentence, I saw fish, and like my first thought was paragraph 6, just because we had just talked about fish, and I was like, oh, well, maybe we're getting into like more fish species stuff. But then,
Mhm.
like to your point, I saw that last sentence, and also the fact that this was in the forest, and you were thinking about paragraph 2, which like was awesome. And
Mhm.
then I kind of felt like I agree with you. I think it's a mix of like both paragraphs, and it's more reminiscent of paragraph 6 for sure. Like I
Yeah.
think it directly relates to that idea, but the fact that they're kind of comparing, the old surveys to like today, and then they're like, well, how am I going to do it? I feel like they were sort of looking at the old impact and then, or the old impact of humans, and then now thinking about how to plan, which was kind of even something that we saw. I think, yeah, we saw that in paragraph 2 where it talked about how the archaeologists are part of, like they're integrated into the Forest Service today.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like in a way an example of that too. But I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. It relates to paragraph 6 the most. But it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like it's I mean, this is one of the reasons I love cars. It's like everything is so for better or for worse, a lot of these ideas are connected, right? Rather than like an outline, like one, paragraph one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, etc., where it's all linear. I really feel like cars ends up being like a mind map, like of
Yeah.
interrelated ideas. Again, our job as readers is to figure out which idea is the most critical to the author. But it's interesting to see how these relate, right? Keep in mind, like the author believes these things are connected. That's why they're talking about it in the same, 600 word essay, essentially, which is a Cars passage. Um, it's fun to track. I hope our listeners like to track this stuff too, because
Yeah.
that's the job with when it comes to Cars. Um, so I still think that we're pretty solid on our main idea, but we've got one last paragraph and it's super short. I'm hoping that this is like a mic drop moment where everything becomes super clear. I love it when authors do that.
Yeah,
Three last,
that'd be the best.
yeah, three last sentences. Let's see what we get. So here, P8, cultural and archaeological remains are more than the evidence people left on a landscape. Ooh. Okay, so it's not just us leaving evidence. Okay. What is it? It's more than this. All right. Something about archaeology. They are expressions of their interaction with that landscape. Okay. So archaeology shows and expresses how humans interact with their landscape. This feels so familiar. And I'm excited. We only have one paragraph left, but I'm feeling like we're building up to that mic drop moment. Last sentence, a historical record, if you will, of the dynamic and complex nature of ecosystems. Yes. I feel like
Yeah.
this last little paragraph, we're coming back to P1 talking about how forests are complex and, have this complicated history, but we're also being very clear talking about how archaeology is showing how people interact with their environment. This to me puts a little nice bow on it. It's the mic drop moment, which I love so
Oh yeah.
much. Right. This helps me clarify the main idea. What do you think the main idea is from this passage or from this paragraph? Kind of both at the same time.
I would say it's like kind of an idea of, you know, that forests are shaped by humans, and archaeologists are sort of exploring that, right? They're sort of like, you know, looking at the impact humans had, and then trying to form a plan to sort of move forward. That's obviously a lengthy main idea, but I would say the shortened version is kind of that forests are impacted by humans, and archaeologists are looking at that sort of thing. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. This passage, I feel like, when reading in your head, it's like, oh, okay, cool, cool, cool. Yeah, forest, archaeology, love it. There's actually a lot here, right? We had multiple
Hmm.
examples, we had lots of factual information, right? This passage I enjoy because of the topic, but also I could see how this could be a pretty tough passage for students. Um, so hopefully, now that we've gone through it, we're feeling clear. Okay, we get it, right? Archaeology is showing this interaction humans have with their environments. I'm feeling ready for the questions. There are 5 questions that go along with this passage, and we encourage you guys to try them. Okay, so the link is in the description if you'd like to give these questions a try. It's also, of course, on the homepage if you happen to be listening this on the day that it's posted. Um, but please, now that you have a good, solid idea of what the passage is describing and discussing, this is the perfect time to go in and get specific, targeted, essentially critical thinking practice. So there are 5 questions. These questions are going to basically ask you to apply what you've learned in this passage, sometimes on a very narrow paragraph specific level, sometimes on a broader main idea level. But with the knowledge you have of how this passage has been structured and connected, you are now in an excellent place to go in and explore your essentially process of elimination skills, right? Your CARS question strategies. So we hope that you do attempt these questions. And we hope that you enjoyed our passage breakdown for eco-archaeology. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, wherever we've caught you, morning, afternoon, night. Hopefully, none of you guys are listening to this at like 2 in the morning. If so, go get some sleep. But it's been such a pleasure. Usher, also, thank you so much for being here today. Um, I'm sure students are excited to hear more from you. So thank you for being part of it.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to being on more of these and helping you guys all out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, happy studying, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next one.